Thanks for joining the Tech Caddie. We have Brendon Beebe today, and I thought it would be really interesting to speak with you, Brendon, based on your past time at foreUP, and then what you're doing now at, I believe it's Luminous, correct?
Yep, correct.
So welcome to the show, Brendon Beebe, CTO at Luminous, and just tell us a little bit about what you're up to today. And then maybe we'll go back and visit all the stuff you accomplished at foreUP.
Yeah, so right now I'm no longer in the golf industry. I'm working on another startup, kind of same stage as early foreUP when I joined. And we're in the e-commerce space. And so we provide a system of record and forecasting and replenishment across warehouses for small businesses that are primarily e-commerce.
And this is your second, I think, stint as a CTO. You were CTO at foreUP, but that was the first time you had been a CTO.
Correct. If you don't count like the tiny startups where there's like two people, then
right.
Yes, this would be the second.
Right. It's interesting. I don't know how much you stay on top of golf tech today, but waitlist technology is becoming quite popular in golf. And actually, one of the first things you ever built was related to waitlist, but it was related, I think, to getting classes at BYU.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that you had done that so many years ago, and now it's very hot, so to speak, in golf.
Oh, really? Yeah, I noticed you had the Notify.
Yes, and they just call it Notify. They just spell
Notify?
it differently. Yeah.
Okay.
There's Notify. There's Tee Time Snipe. There's Loop Golf, and then there's actually a couple of newer tee sheets that have said, hey, we see this more as a feature, and it's going to be a feature of our product, right? And so there's a company that just actually launched today called Golf Geek Software. There's another company called Unity Club or Club Unity, and so waitlist seems to be pretty popular.
That's the challenge, right? Is like foreUP, if they wanted a tee sheet, a waitlist functionality, they could just build it in a week or two. And it's hard to build a company around just a small feature like that.
Agreed. But it's interesting about this waitlist stuff, and I don't want to get too far off track.
Yeah, go ahead.
But boy, talk about ROI for the operator. I mean, you know how much money it really costs an operator when there's a no-show, right? Especially a Saturday morning, foursome no-show. Well, or say it's a late cancellation. Say they cancel Friday evening. Well, if you cancel Friday evening now and you it's a golf course using waitlist technology, it will send a text message to every single person that's expressed an interest in playing on Saturday morning. And then it's just it's kind of a call to action to quickly backfill that tee time. So there's good money, good revenue impact for the operator.
I think it's a brilliant idea. Even the popular courses like Bethpage and Torrey Pines, they actually had an issue where there's GitHub repos online where you can actually download the code that runs their waitlist on your computer, and the GitHub repos will do that exact same thing and just automatically text you. And so in the courses where demand far exceeds supply, the open markets just created these open source tools to do exactly that.
Yes, and I think several companies have figured that out, and now they're
completely
sticking their brand around it. So let's for the people that don't know, and I encourage you to correct me every time I make a mistake here, but
yeah, of course.
foreUP essentially moves from napkin to reality in 2011, 2012. I think, and Joel Regar is the CEO at the time, founder certainly, and I think maybe starts it with a couple of other people.
It was Joel Regar, Evan Tashima, and then Joel Hopkins. I don't know how his name doesn't get out there. That was like the brains behind it. He built the first prototypes, and yeah, it was the three of them that got the initial small investment in 2011, and they kind of lived in poverty for a couple of years to get that thing running.
And so Joel Hopkins. So I'll have to dig in on that a little bit. I appreciate that. And so then I think it's in 2014 or 2015 you joined, and what I'm not sure about is, did you join as CTO or did you get elevated after you got there?
No, so I was doing contract for them, contract work in 2014. And if anybody was on foreUP, the first rendition of foreUP marketing was kind of like the contract project I worked on the side. And so at that point, it was Joel Hopkins and another developer called Jordan Bush. And the two of them were the primary engineers at the time. And the project was getting a little too wide. There was just too much going on. And it was getting to a point, there's a few key things that happened. I think four reservations that turned off service in 2014.
Four reservations was acquired
Yes.
by GolfNow. And I'm not sure where you're headed with that. Are you saying, and so that opened up the field a little bit more?
Yeah, so that was a huge influx point for foreUP. And that's kind of right when they took me on was during that period. So things were starting to explode. It was getting incredibly complex. Bugs in the software were getting a little too hard to handle. So they brought me in to, hey, we need to get development under control. How do we take care of this?
And so before you became full-time, I am curious. Were you working for a company, that had engineers out being third-party engineers, or was that on your own in the evenings as a side gig?
It was on my own in the evenings.
Okay.
So it was in that stage of hustling where I had my full-time job and then worked at Lumen at foreUP in the evenings.
That's excellent. How'd you guys even find each other?
That's a great question. I think a friend of a friend. I knew somebody over there. You live in Utah, so it would stand to reason in the tech community. It's okay. So that makes sense. Okay. And so now you become the CTO, and I think at some point you all had to make some difficult decisions, but I also think that they were successful decisions. But when you kind of first, became a full-time employee, you had to work through some challenges, I think. Oh yeah, it was a crazy time because those first years you're in, how do we get to $1 million in revenue? And the founders are paying themselves nothing. They have kids, they have families, and we're just trying to get on any customers we can. In golf, you feel like golf is like this super small market, like there's not much room to grow in. And so you're just trying to sell whoever you can, but you end up selling management companies, public clubs, private clubs. And every time you sell somebody, they're like, I need a new feature. I need new functionality. And nobody in the golf space is willing to pay anything. So you're out here, contract values are like $2,000 a month. Like, how do you build a company off of that breadth of features while paying this amount per year? It's really hard.
And so I think that's the question. So how did you do it?
Just barely. We had 3 generalists. So Joel Hopkins, myself, and Jordan Bush were kind of the type of guys who could do everything. We didn't have an outsourced team. And it's almost, in some respects, it's easier to see like where other people went wrong. In the moment, you don't realize it's a good decision. But like one of the things I feel is really important is if you have engineers who understand the problem, they can build things in a way where it will help you in the future. You see companies like T-Snap, that was like the blossom, like they were the Apple. That's what they were trying to go after, right? Is the Apple of the golf point of sale market. And they were spending millions of dollars a year on these outsourced contractors to do their bidding. But what you run into is like when the engineers are really far from the problem, they don't know where things are going. And so you end up, you probably are ignoring your user input. Those engineers aren't on the course seeing how this is actually being used. Like the customer may say they want X, but in reality, they need Y. And you need an engineer who's able to think that way.
And if I could just throw it in there. I mean, there is another philosophy out there where maybe you think you are such a good product person, you don't think your customer knows what they want, right? And so you'll build what they should want or something. I do think that there's a bit of
that.
100%.
Yeah. Like that was, I think that's where T-Snap went wrong, is they weren't listening to their customer. Dude, the customers were saying like, we want to be able to change the tee sheet after somebody books, but no. It's like, no, that's not how you do it. Like, right. Yeah, you can go the opposite way where you're not listening to them in reality.
And I do think the flip side of that is we had a guest on earlier, Tyler Arnold, who has a new company. And I think it would be interesting.
Is that GolfNow?
It's actually, it's called Eagle Club Systems.
Oh, Eagle Club Systems, yes.
Right. And I think it'd be interesting. It's at some point I want to talk about maybe how you can help some of these newer companies that are coming up. But at any rate, Tyler will talk about trying to not build everything for everybody, right? So there's a happy medium in there somewhere, right? Where it's like, you do need to listen, but boy, don't make the mistake of listening too much and building every single little thing for that one golf course. There's a story in golf tech. I don't know if you're familiar, but way back in the day, IBS started to build kind of a special version for ClubLink, a rather large management company out of Canada that had locations in Florida as well. Well, they got so far down the road, they got stuck.
You never do that. Oh my gosh. I think Club Profit probably did that too. Like where you build yourself into so much technical debt, you are just completely blocked in a corner and you're not going anywhere.
Right.
And you have to fight that. Like there were times where we had management companies, 100 courses saying, hey, we need this. And we're looking at it thinking, not a single other course will ever benefit from this. And you have to make a decision like, we can't. We're a software company building something for the golf industry. If you want something custom, we'll give you the tools to be able to customize it yourself, but that's not something we can do.
In doing some research for this call, one thing I uncovered about part of your strategy that I thought was great, but you don't hear about it a lot in this space. You guys kind of came up with two specific, not sure if I'd call them goals or criteria. I guess they'd be goals. You wanted to limit the opportunity for the user to make a mistake, and you wanted to reduce the amount of time the user had to engage with the software. And I think what that meant was you just wanted to make booking a tee time really fast, if at all possible. You didn't want to have them live in the software. You don't.
Yeah, how did you know that?
Well, I did some research. But when I learned that, I thought, wow, really smart. I wish more people in this industry did that, right? And I don't hear about a lot of other tech companies talk that way. And I just thought it'd be interesting. Maybe you could share with us, like, how did you even get to that point? How did you make the decision to prioritize those two things?
No, it's an interesting paradigm when you're the point of sale or you're the tee sheet. You're not a software people necessarily want to use. Like they're at the front desk or they're a waiter or a waitress taking orders. They don't want to be in your software. And if you're making them be in there for longer than they need to, then you're kind of doing a poor job. And we found out, I think we launched an NPS campaign. NPS is like a Net Promoter Score, where we ask customers like, hey, would you recommend us to your friends? And intuitively, like that high school student in the pro shop will never recommend us to a friend. So what's the point of asking? And we could have simply dismissed those negative comments as like, this is just a high school kid. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But instead we accepted it for what it was. And our NPS score was terrible. And we could have easily like dismissed all the bad ones saying those are high school kids. But we accepted it and asked ourselves the question of like, what would it take for this guy to enjoy working in our software? And it was make it as easy as possible. He can check a line of people in during rush hour, get them through and take payments as fast as possible, or get it so that waitress can split her bill as quickly as possible. And as we started to dissect that, we were able to use the tools we had in place. There's a lot of product tools that measure usage and things like that. And we could see where people were spending a lot of time, where were people getting angry. We could then go back and kind of watch those happen in real time. Like, why were they getting angry? And we came to that conclusion, like, they just want to be out of the software. And so we just made that a goal for several years. Every aspect of the software, how can we fix this up?
You probably had to run your dev stuff through those two filters, I would think. Does it check these two boxes, and then assumably you went on to a lot of other boxes you had to check or something? But
yeah, by the time we got to that spot, we had a team that was their sole focus, is like, let's choose the food and beverage software. How can we decrease the number of clicks to get to checkout? Yep. And that was I think that's a key. Like when you have a software team, and I see this a lot in the golf industry where it's non-software guys starting companies, they don't let their engineers think for themselves. And at foreUP, a big piece of the culture there was we had this high level thing of decreased clicks, but you figure out as a software team how to solve that. And they're the ones that would go to the course. They would figure out the real reasons. So there's zero micromanagement, and it was a lot of like freedom on
right.
accomplish that.
So it's kind of like as leaders, you guys would set the North Star, and then they would build the map how to get there. They would figure out what roads they wanted to take, and hopefully you had hired people that could get there.
And we could only do it because we didn't outsource our software development. It was, and you can't, when your core product is software development and you outsource it, you're not a real software company, and you can't do that type of management.
Right. So I'm curious. I've been very closely involved with a couple of different golf management software platforms. I think that's what we're supposed to call it. That did not measure user behavior. Is that something that you all then did build organically into foreUP, or how did you measure how long it took people to do things, et cetera, et cetera? Was it third-party software, or did you build some measurement tools in there?
No, there's third-party software we were using.
Okay.
And that was key to everything we did. I think one of our strengths near the end was our product teams, who they would dissect that data. Like, we had almost too much data. We didn't have too much. We had the right amount of data. And those product managers were able to really dissect it, dive into where we needed to focus, why were people complaining, why were people angry, and they had that freedom and enough data to actually make the right choices. There was a culture around, like, if somebody came up and said, hey, we should go this route, it was like, why? Show me.
Yeah.
I don't trust your gut. Your gut's probably wrong.
Yeah. It's, what you learn when you're building these companies is just how important culture is, and how important it is that the leaders really, they absolutely embody the culture, right? It's people, it's learned, and people watch behavior, and it's so stinking important listen. I think when the leaders are truly intimately involved, like you refer to yourselves as generalists, but really what that meant was, hey, I can fix anything that gets broken. Like, I'm not afraid to get in there and do it. And I think that there's great value in that. So you're in the role, you're fixing problems, you're also growing. I think a lot of us in the industry watched you guys grow. It's interesting. I think foreUP came along at a time that there was some good opportunity, because it was kind of cool to be in the cloud, and you can kind of just brand yourself as like, hey, we're cloud-based, whereas very few others are. And I look back on those times, I'm like, yeah, you could really run a long way by saying you were in the cloud, and some of the hipper management companies were going to think that was pretty cool, and yeah, this is where we want to be, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious today, and I know you're not super involved today, but what would be the separator today? Or do you think we've gotten so commoditized that, like, now we're just down to price in terms of golf technology?
That's a great question. And you're 100% accurate on the cloud-based point of sale. Like, that was the sales pitch, from, I think, T-Snap, Chrono Golf, foreUP. That was the number one sales pitch for the three of them. Up until 2019, 2020 is when, I don't know if you can actually use that anymore. Right. And when we started shifting towards is, like, value. You have to be able to show to your golf courses that you're returning value in some respect. And so we did that through outsourced marketing and other marketing related tools.
But that became, and so I was involved with that as well, but that really became service, right? That's not really software or really technology, right? That was, okay, now it's going to turn into IBM and be a service game. It's not going to be these great tools that we've built. Right.
Well, and the other piece of that, then, I think you can supplement with services, and where we were going. And it's been a couple years, year and a half since I've been out completely. So I don't know where they're at right now. But at the time, it's like, okay, how do we automate this process, or how do we build it into the product so that the marketing happens automatically? Because it's a kind of a recurring process that you can go through. But then the next strategy too is being the platform of golf. And this is what you can't replace. If your system is wide open, if everybody can build into it, what we wanted to do was build an ecosystem of small apps where somebody like Notify, and they're probably into the foreUP API. We have the best documentation. It's probably the easiest. There's even a foreUP app store. If you've used foreUP, you probably are aware of it, where you all of a sudden your windows are wide open. You can use all these point solutions that do what foreUP did best. And that was our key strategy, actually. It wasn't to build the best tool for everything. It was, hey, let's do everything. Let's build a flexible product that can work with every single golf course. But then let's let these small point solutions come in and do things and specialize in things that we'll never get to.
Yeah.
And make it as easy as possible for them to make money.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because I think it's great, and I have seen the marketplace that you're referring to, and it's sure it's I'm not sure anybody would not love that. What do you think about point of sale being in that marketplace? And so what I'm suggesting is at the end of the day, is the most important piece to a foreUP or a G1 or whatever, is the most important piece the tee sheet? And maybe it actually can just go ahead and connect to Square, or maybe it can connect to Clover, or maybe it can connect to Lightspeed Retail. Or do you think, nah, you better have a golf specific point of sale and tee sheet, and then go ahead and connect to everything else?
I think the core is actually the point of sale. I've seen a lot of people try and do Clover, or a lot of people try and bring in a third party. I mean, there's a small startup called Birdie that uses Square, I think, as and their point of sale. And the problem you run to every case is that connection. It's adding this extra step to go from tee sheet to point of sale. And it's that extra little bit slows things down. Then you have to worry about syncing. How do you sync over? The unique thing about golf is the member credits at the pro shop or the country club where you can charge your account. How do you charge your accounts, and how do you make sure that data syncs over correctly? And every scenario where I've seen somebody try to just use a third-party point of sale, that's what they run into. And so the core was identifying the point of sale was actually our core. I don't know if it's out yet, or let's just say in the vision was eventually to merge the tee sheet and point of sale to be one.
Yes.
Your checkout ideally is just a single button click, everything rings up onto the credit card machine, and you can check somebody in within 15 seconds without there being any type of jump between them.
Yeah, I think that is the ultimate, and I think a lot of people have chased it. So, okay, I talked a little bit about other companies that are coming on, and it's interesting you mentioned Birdie. We invited Birdie to come on, and that still may happen, but I do think the Birdie approach is interesting, right? And that's why I want to have him on and talk about it. At any rate, the other thing that you have experience with that I think some of the newer companies are just kind of getting introduced to is building a really successful company and yet not being that gorilla in the space, right? Not being number one. I think when you and I were setting up this call, I talked about how, Pepsi is really profitable. They might not be number one, but they can still be really profitable. Talk about how you navigated the world of GolfNow, or navigated the relationship with GolfNow, how that impacted what you guys built, if it impacted it at all. Maybe it didn't impact it at all. But I do think for some of these up and coming tech leaders, to hear others talk about how you manage that big piece of the industry, I think is important.
To be fair, we never saw ourselves as number two. We saw the GolfNow aggregate booking side of things as a completely different market that we could have got to eventually. But in relation to the tee sheet point of sale market, what's important is when you're measuring the market leader, you look how you should identify that is you look at the number of contracts that are up for renewal, how many people are renewing their software, or switching software every year, and are you taking over 50% of those?
And let me just interrupt quickly, just as a heads up, because people know in my background, that's why to the salespeople in this industry or whomever, get your CRM up to date. When Brendon talks about knowing when contracts are coming up for renewal, you need to know those things, and to know that, it's the people on the ground that got to keep the data up to date. But go on. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so you look at the number of contracts that are up for renewal every year, how many people are switching every year, and how many of those as a company are you taking? And I think foreUP at its peak, I don't know what they're doing right now, right? But when I was leaving, we were easily taking over half the contracts that were up for renewal every year from all courses nationwide.
That's tremendous. Tremendous.
And we were growing. We were adding an incredibly number of courses every year.
And you won big accounts. You won the New York State Parks, which of course is Beth Page, and I'm not sure if you had won Tory at that point or not, but I mean you were winning big named accounts. We're using foreUP for sure.
Yeah, if you looked at the public sector, we were taking well over half those contracts, and so in my mind, in foreUP's mind, we were the number one. As far as like absolute numbers, we were on track. We were going to be number one. And at some point, it becomes a threat enough to GolfNow that, do we enter that market? Do we not enter the market? Those are the types of questions I think you have to start asking yourself when you get to the 2,000 to 3,000 course mark. Because that's in a market of 15,000 golf courses.
Right.
And 2,000 to 3,000 is sizable.
Yes, agreed. So, okay, so part of what you just said there was part of the way you manage that relationship is you never saw yourself as number two, right? You never saw you thought, our product speaks for itself. We're incredibly passionate about our product. We believe in our product, and that's how we're going to run the company. Of course, then things continue to evolve, and founders want to move on to the next thing, right? I mean, like you say, you get to 1,000 golf courses, you get to 2,000 golf courses, and you feel like you've gotten to the summit. And so now comes private equity money. How do we exit? How do we navigate that? Talk about that a little bit. Talk about making those decisions, but then maybe too, and I don't know how long you stuck around, but how does the culture, how does the world change after the private equity money comes in?
Well, to be fair, the decision to sell, what the unique thing about foreUP is that they're pretty much bootstrapped. So I think the founders and employees had well over 90% of the company. And so it's very much, as founders, Joel Hopkins and Evan Chima, they were the ones to decide, hey, we've been doing this for well over a decade. It's time to move on to something else with their lives. And I don't know which options were entertained, but eventually it was, PE money comes in. And I think whether doesn't matter how you get acquired. When you get acquired, things change in a massive way, right? They are the new owners. And we enjoyed this period of time where we were the owners. We had nobody to report to. We could set our own priorities and do what we thought was best. And then when the new owners come in, they have new priorities, a new culture, and it's either you adopt or it's time to get out. And that's a good time that's when I left. I have a problem with authority and but yeah, I don't know how much detail I want to go into, but that's about where it went.
Well, listen, you're welcome to get as detailed as you want. I try to tell as many people as I can, so I'll just kind of talk to the whole audience right now. This podcast, if you're in golf course technology, this podcast is your place to say something if you have something to say, and obviously we want it to be interesting, and maybe that's part of my job to make sure it's going to be interesting, but I want people to feel like they can come on here, not to air grievances, but to share, right? To share so that we get better as an industry and we learn from different things. And so I always want people to know that this is a place to come on and say what you have to say. So how long did you stay on after Battery? So just for people that don't know, Battery Ventures out of Boston is who ultimately invested in foreUP. That may have been under the Club Essential umbrella. I'm not sure. Maybe you could fill me in on that.
Yeah, they're currently part of Club Essential Holding, and I believe they're trying to bring together. So Club Essential is private. They see foreUP as kind of their public solution. And they have other kind of recreational software that they're trying to bring together as a solution, or at least a company that can provide a solution for everybody.
And, another firm is Full Steam, who had purchased Club Profit. They're more on they're very specifically related to payment processing. I think a lot of this business is going to payment processing, right? That I have said that I believe that payment processing can almost take the place of barter. So in other words, 100%. The way the relationship would work is you go to the golf course owner and you say, I want to be your payment processor and I want to be it so bad, I'll give you all my software for free, right? And just let me be your, and so that's kind of how barter worked. And I've got a little bit of experience with that. But So I don't know how involved battery is in the payment space, but I suspect that that's always a reason that money will come in golf until everybody goes that
Yeah,
route.
because at the end of the day, like as a company in tech, you have to be making money. And to be fair, golf course owners do not want to pay anything. And so the costs are sent to them either through trade or through payment processing or some other kind of indirect method. So at the end of the day, the company has to make money.
Sure.
And so I totally agree. I think that's definitely going that way of payment processing, which is why it's so important that point of sale is the core of the product, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing making money.
Right. It's a good point. Now, I think what you said is spot on, but then we know that like 80% of a public golf course's revenue does flow through the tee sheet. In other words, the vast majority of revenue at a golf course comes from tee time sales. And so that's why this tee sheet becomes so important. And I am curious to know, when you started building a tee sheet or started to improve the existing tee sheet, what was your philosophy? Like, what do you think today when you think about tee sheet? Was tee sheet the biggest thing you did at foreUP? Or maybe you would say, nah, actually member billing was a bigger deal to me than tee sheet was. I guess I sit in this world of valuing the tee sheet a great deal. I'm curious to know what you think.
You're so spot on. Member billing was super important for our private play, but for a public course, billing's fairly simple, which is where you can get in trouble as a software company. Like if you are like, oh, member billing at the municipal course, I do that. We should be able to do it for the private country club. Sorely mistaken, right? So I think it depends on the market, and which is really important to like which market are you targeting.
But the market for foreUP, generally speaking, was public. Agreed. Yeah, so tee sheet would be.
The tee sheet was clutch, and we were lucky enough. We had Torrey Pines, we had Bethpage, we had, the Podunk course in the middle of nowhere. We knew the gamut of what a tee sheet had to support. And it's far more complex, and you run into far more edge cases than you'd ever think possible, right? And so the initial tee sheet, it was kind of built on, things were tacked on. And sometime in like 2019, 2018 is when we started the full rebuild. And it was taking into account, okay, everything we know now, how do we build something that's flexible enough to meet the needs of the 27-hole course in Florida and Bethpage and Torrey Pines. And we started from that point, and it had all that flexibility built into it. So you were talking about a guy from Eagle Club Systems where he's like, can't build everything. And it's like, yeah, you can't, but if you build it in a flexible way, you can actually support everything. And so there's a few key modules within foreUP that allow you to customize the software to your needs. And we never had to go into a course and say, hey, in order to use us, you have to change how you operate. It was actually, we have an implementation team, they'll consult you and they'll set up foreUP to meet exactly the needs you need.
Interesting. So you mentioned teams, and I think I really believe that there was a time that foreUP was best in class when it came to customer experience, customer support. And I know that I can remember being at the PGA show and talking to different foreUP people and them saying, we have a goal of 0 churn. And I would think, okay, that's crazy. Like, I can't believe that you would say that out loud. Had I said that out loud where I was, I'd have been held accountable to it. But to your point, you guys were the owners, right? And so you could do that. And I know that you may not specifically been an owner, but you know what I mean. I mean, the owners were and so you could say what you wanted to say in that environment. But I think it would be good for people to hear the goal of 0 churn did mean you got to like 4% or 5% churn, which is, I think, outstanding. Talk about that a little bit, how you guys prioritize that, how you made that be part of your culture.
So one, if you look at the golf market, you don't have a lot of courses to sell to.
And it's not growing, right? It is kind of this industry. That's why so many of us have left but it's this industry that's closed-ended. You know, and so it's
you can't churn through customers. There's no way you turn a customer this year and you're gonna gain them back next year. It's you turn a customer and they're probably gone until that head pro leaves the golf course,
Right.
And so early on, there's a time where our churn was like 15%, and we were still profitable, but just barely. We weren't growing very fast. And we decided as a leadership team, like, our goal has to be 0% churn. Let's take a step back. Let's refocus on the segments we do well. Let's refocus. I had a LinkedIn post recently where I talked about how we split it up into separate segments of the market. And we created support teams and implementation teams and engineering teams that were focused specifically on these segments. And it was less about, hey, we need to go build more software, but let's fix all the problems we have. Let's fix everything people are complaining about. Let's take that NPS score. Let's take the feedback. And it was a company-wide focus at that point, even to the sales, right? If we think this customer is not going to be happy on our platform, we're not going to sell them. We'll come back to them next year when we're ready. And the goal was actually 0%. And it was, and there were years where we lost 20, 30 courses maximum at it, and we had 1,500 courses on our platform.
And when you look back on the churn, when you guys were as high as, what'd you say, 15%? You were as high as 15%?
Mm-hmm.
When you look back on that, do you recall what the one or two top reasons for churn was?
Bugs. It was, or features that we sold a customer on that we weren't quite ready for.
Yeah, overselling.
Like over-promising. Yeah,
yes.
overselling.
Yes.
Was a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the other side, that was the software just wasn't good. We were trying to do too many things too fast, and we were just kind of tripping over ourselves. And so we had to take a step back and rethink about how we were solving the problems and take care of the core issues. Like, we have to be able to process people. The software has to be up 100% of the time. It has to meet all these needs.
And I'm curious, because it could be different today. Where did foreUP live, so to speak? I mean, were you guys AWS? Were you Google?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you work that, or how did you manage that?
We were in AWS, and fairly simple architecture. If we it's for a dev podcast, we can talk about specifics, but it was in AWS.
Okay, and I'm curious, what did you not get to? What did you not build that you thought you would eventually build? But of course, everyone moves on at some point. But anything that you thought you would get to that you never were able to get your hands around?
It's been so long. Let's just say there's a backlog a mile long. Like, there's so many small companies popping up, and every single one of the ideas I've heard, it was on our backlog. It was just a matter of prioritization.
Did you all ever talk about the phone? Did you ever think about being in that call center space at all, or building tools that made it easy for golf courses to connect to different call centers?
Yes, we actually have it. It just never become a primary focus. So we have a call center that some management companies use. We have a IVR, so automated booking, that some large municipalities use. It's not future thinking. It was more something we just had to roll out because people still require that as a need.
For sure. I mean, and we see it in 2022 and 2023. We actually saw some people come back to call center just because demand was up so much.
And a way to get past the limitations.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's difficult. So you built that marketplace really, really good. You built really good member billing. You worked a lot on the tee sheet. If you were going to do anything different, if you were going to start your own company today in golf, again, thinking about some of these newer guys that are coming up now, what's one or two pieces of advice you'd give them? What do you think you would have maybe done differently, or you did this one thing and that was the right thing to do and you would do it every time forward?
One, I think the idea of bootstrapping or doing a small round where you raise 250 grand or $500,000 from some angel investors and build from there. You're not going to build $1 billion. Well, I think you could if you spent a couple decades in it, but $1 billion company in golf is going to be really hard. So bootstrap it, do owner owned, and then prioritizing, like, what is the sub segment within golf that you're going to own completely. And you can't do everything off the bat. And that's where we had the highest churn, is when we were just trying to do too much. And so hyper focusing on, the municipal course that's doing 1 to 3 million revenue, we're going to just crush that out of the park, provide better support, do everything as well as possible.
I appreciate that. You know, one of the questions I've tried to ask people on this show is to think about golf courses today that don't even have an electronic tee sheet. And I'm sure that must have come up when you were at foreUP. Just what's your sense for that? You know, they're not exposed to as much success as they could have, but do you feel like, well, maybe they've not transitioned because we've done something wrong on the tech side? Or do you think, no, that's just human nature, and not everybody will ever get there? There'll always be some percentage of people that stay, say, non-tech related.
That was always on our list of opportunities, because how many courses are still on pen and paper? Like,
well,
3,000?
It's thousands and thousands still to this day, Brendon. Yeah.
And I think GolfNow in 2019, they like hyper focused, at least in their marketing efforts, they were going after the computerless pro shops. And what we found is it was almost too hard to sell them. Usually these were courses that honestly just didn't care. Maybe they didn't have enough revenue to even care about having it, or maybe the course wasn't busy enough and their locale was just walk-ons, and they didn't really care about online booking. So I think there's still an opportunity there, but it's just such a hard sell. I wouldn't focus on that. And the contracts are going to probably be so small that it just doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, I do. We mentioned Birdie. I think Birdie was one of those that came along that he felt like he could get some of those people because he was going to make it so stinking easy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever met an individual, Sean Berryman, was with this company called T Leader, and he had made it so that if it was 10 o'clock at night and you found his website, you could have a tee sheet up and running in 10 minutes. You didn't need it. No one was required. You put your intervals in and a couple of other things, and your tee sheet was live. Mm-hmm. And there was a thought that maybe that if you could just figure out a way to get it in front of these people. But I don't think anybody in the industry has figured out how to crack that nut yet. It's
people aren't buying. Like, when your software is free, your expectations on it are going to be minuscule. I know Evan always told the story of it was harder to sell foreUP when he was giving away for free than charging money. People don't want a free product, and because you have that fear of there's probably no support. If it's free, how are they making any money? Will they be around next year? People are looking for a long guaranteed win. Like, this is going to meet my needs for the next decade. And those people will pay better. They'll do more revenue. You'll be able to sustain yourself as a company. Now, probably a better option, if I were to tackle like the pen and paper, would be to build just a generic booking engine where there's not a lot of specific golf things, but it is as easy as sign up. And now you can go into tennis courts and simulators and all these other areas that are tangent to golf or similar in some respect.
Right. Pickleball had put a lot of push on more reservations. So okay. Well,
so if you're gonna go that small, you have to do wider.
Right. I'm curious, just kind of maybe to wrap it up here. Are you in touch with the people that you were working with at foreUP? Does that team still keep a Slack channel or something like that? And you guys are following each other in your new careers?
Oh yeah, we all have a Slack channel. We chat a lot, and I think pretty much everybody's kind of moved on to the next thing. So you'll be seeing. What's interesting is you tend to see in the golf industry, it feels like everybody's been in golf for forever. And a lot of the guys at foreUP are moving on to other industries, other markets, and it's not the lifetime golf experience that you've seen previously.
Right. Well, listen, I think what you guys built was amazing, and listen, it's still a great company, right? We're not here to talk about it in the past, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about, how you got from 100 to 1,500. And so I appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us.
I don't know. Oh, a random thing that just came up. I don't know if you have time still.
Sure, absolutely.
So it just coming to my mind of something we did right regarding like flexibility. I don't know if you're familiar with foreUP passes.
No, maybe they're punch cards. I don't know.
So it's a system in there it was built for a management company up in Washington who has complex rules of like, if you buy this pass, you can use it two times at this course, but if you use it 2 times at this course, you can only use it once at this course. It's only available from like 12 o'clock to 3 p.m. And unless you use like super complex rule sets, right, for a large management company. This feature set was built for them, but with the understanding of like, hey, this has to be applicable everywhere. And so it essentially became this super flexible, almost like engine, where any course could program any set of rules within this, privileged system. And that became like the key reason we were able to onboard 90% of our courses. They all have some sort of rule engine created in there, and it's all custom to however they run. And it came from this really random place in Oregon or Washington. But
yeah, it's interesting. I totally can see why that would have appealed to so many different golf courses. However, it is kind of like the antithesis of dynamic pricing and maybe like optimizing pricing for each individual tee time, right? And so there's certainly a camp of people in the industry that kind of want to see those cards go away because they want to help operators make more money per individual tee time. But then there's a whole nother camp that says, yeah, but that's really what the client wants, right? That's what the guy that owns the golf course, that's how he wants to run his golf course, and we ought to build, what he wants. And so,
what's your take on memberships? I know.
I'm a believer on the public side. So whether we call them annual passes or whatever you want to call them. My fear about annual passes is that they can get to the best inventory, and ultimately the real rate that I collected for the best inventory maybe goes down, right? And again, the world has changed in the last 3 years because demand is so far up.
Right.
5 years ago, maybe this didn't matter, but now that demand is here, there's an opportunity for golf courses to get healthy on their Saturday and Sunday morning inventory. And so if it's me, and I've counseled some people on this, I sell an annual pass that does not get access to that inventory. And then I also sell another benefit, if you will. I sell an extended booking window benefit, right? Just for a few $100 extra a year.
I'll let them book early.
I'll let you book 3 weeks early versus a week early or something like that. And doesn't mean I'm going to lower those prices. But I know that there's a class of golfer out there that really wants to know that they can get their tee times organized and not have to worry about it. And again, now that demand is up, I mean, listen, the reason that people like Notify and Tee Time Snipe exist is because demand is up so much, right? And so because demand is up, I think more operators could leverage that into some added benefits that you could actually sell to people. So that's the way I see those two things.
I have a question. So the real gorilla in this space, like the one who's making the most of the money in the software and reselling tee times, is obviously GolfNow. How do you compete with a GolfNow? Like if you were to start a company and that was your goal, like that is a potential $1 billion idea, right?
Sure.
But how do you I've seen a lot of aggregate companies come up and nobody really nails it. How do you?
Yeah, so to me, one, I think an aggregator will have to come along that is not golf specific. And so there are a couple aggregators like this that aggregate activities in general, right? And you make golf as one of those activities, and you figure out a way to do a deal with a foreUP and a couple of other big TC companies where you can have a meaningful amount of inventory. And golf is just part of the game, right? So I think that's certainly
that's a great idea, actually.
I think that's one approach. The other thing I would say to people like a foreUP, or heck, let's talk more about Eagle Club Systems, Member Sports, 10-4, the booking experience. And this is not to say to not use GolfNow, but the booking engine that they build should be far superior to the booking experience that GolfNow provides, right? You should get it to a place where people just prefer to book through your tech because it's just more convenient. And I do think that there probably needs to be a good reward system in there. I've always been a fan of Southwest Air when it comes to rewards. And again, I go back to this extended window. I don't know why we don't have more golf courses today making one of the benefits of frequency of play of being, I'll extend your window. The more you play here, I'll make it easier for you to book here. And those are things, but again, that doesn't mean I wouldn't use GolfNow in that scenario. I'd still use GolfNow as when I was there, we used to talk about, we're here to introduce golfers to golf courses. Nothing bad about that, right? Nothing bad about introducing golfers to golf courses. And so I think that there's a place for GolfNow, for lots of different golf courses. But if I owned the golf course, I would want my booking experience to be vastly superior to their booking experience. That would be part of my goal.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for coming on. It's a big week for everybody in the industry because it's the PGA show week. But I've been watching you on LinkedIn. I know you have things to say. Like I said, I want to build a home for people that have things to say. I want them to feel comfortable coming on here. So hopefully we'll have you back as things come up. And listen, at the end of the day, congratulations on what you built. You built a really, really great company. And again, the exit, I think, was successful for a lot of people. And I think that's important. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great chatting today. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely.